Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. We were just saying we're so glad people came. You put a session together and you never actually know if anyone will come. So thank you for joining us this morning. Today's session is dedicated to 5 different organizations speaking through their efforts around engagement and outreach with both their stakeholders internally and externally. Speakers today are before you. I'm Sara. I'm the Director of Business Development for Altmetric, a UK-based company. I'm based in Washington, D.C. My colleagues here will introduce themselves down the line. We're going to basically, since we have so long, we're basically going to, it's just like an hour and a half before lunch seems a bit gratuitous. So we're going to encourage questions during the presentations. They're being pretty strict about using the microphones, but if you don't want to get up, I'll just repeat the question. So let's try to have a discussion during each talk. Feel free to ask questions. And then at the end, we'll do a panel discussion and hopefully have more of a conversation with you and what you're doing at your own organizations. So I'm going to go up first and just give a bit of an overview of how Altmetric approaches outreach. We are a software company, so it's a little bit different. I think the story is going to be different whether you're looking at software, journal content, specific services, like a library, for example. So we're a data science company. You might see our donut or our little badges. I think a lot of the publishers in the room probably already use our data. We are facing the challenge, I think, that everyone else in this room is facing, in that this was the scholarly paradigm 200 years ago, and despite the fact that it looks like this now, it's still not terribly different, which can be something of a challenge for a lot of us. And so while the feudal system of tenure and promotion continues in academia, we're all sort of stuck with figuring out how to navigate this transition into a digital paradigm that in some ways feels like it's completed and in other ways feels like it's just getting started. And as a result, you're trying to figure out how to explain this sort of information paradigm to a wide range of researchers and stakeholders that weren't around when this started, to folks who only have known this paradigm for their whole lives. So that's really the challenge we faced at Altmetric in terms of education and outreach, is dealing with misconceptions about the data that we provide, what it represents, who should use it, and how it shouldn't be used. So our particular challenge has largely been around education and correcting misconceptions. So these are the things that, when I meet with faculty, provosts, when you're talking to a government agency or a company, this is the stuff we're constantly unpacking. And it takes a lot of different avenues for us to do this. So the ones that we typically focus on are, peer pressure is just the idea that, it's not just, you're not the only one who's exploring this data. We do a lot of webinars. We have an ambassadors program, which I think many of your organizations probably do. We have events that we organize, which is a huge part of the education process. Certainly an advisory board, and then a very robust social media presence. Please come in. The front is not a scary place. We'd love to have you. Please make yourselves at home. So a little bit about each of these. Peer pressure is super helpful. I know many of you have been into a meeting with potential customers, and the first question is, well, who else is using the data, or who else is buying your content? Who else is buying your service? So we do a bit of this because we have to, but increasingly, you want to be able to make the case based on the quality of the product, the service, or the data itself, not who else has it. But occasionally, you have to pull out this card, and we certainly do that. My previous life at the American Chemical Society, we had started, which was obviously a journal publisher, started doing a lot with webinars, and at Altmetric, just being such a smaller organization and in a lot of ways able to be a bit more nimble because we're so small and so new, we've really found that these have been a critical avenue to reaching potential customers, existing customers, and doing a lot of the education around understanding what this data represents and what you can do with it. These are easy to set up. They're easy tools to use. Everyone knows what a nightmare GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar are. Sometimes they're awesome, sometimes they break. But regardless of whether you're using tools like that to some of the better or the more sort of robust webinar platforms, one person can sit down in a quiet room and run one of these and talk to 100 people at one time globally, in 10 different time zones and have a conversation. And that is a really easy resource light way of reaching a lot of people and educating a lot of people in kind of one go. So that's something that we do frequently. We were doing a sort of a monthly what are altmetrics, what is altmetric data webinar, and we were seeing kind of a big surge in that, and then little by little folks were sort of dropping off. And so we've changed now our monthly webinar to something topical. So a couple months ago, we did a whole analysis of Zika virus-related research and the altmetric data around it that had 100 plus people on it. The one we did last month was a partnership with Retraction Watch, a blog many of you may be familiar with. We partnered with them on the attention that research that's retracted gets versus the retractions itself. And those, appeal to a wide array of sectors, right? So we had institutions on the line, government agencies, pharma companies, the whole range, all interested in the question of retraction. So topical is sometimes the way to go, educational is the way to go, but you tend to always get your message in there either way. The ambassador program is something that we launched when we brought Stacy Conkiel onto our team. She's a well-known sort of expert in the metric space, a librarian, former librarian at University of Indiana Bloomington, and formerly with Impact Story, really one of the first altmetric providers. She's kind of spearheaded this, and the idea is, you can't be everywhere at once. God knows you can't go to every conference, and certainly you can't get in front of every user, but you can have boots on the ground at the institutions and organizations that matter for you to do that on your own. And it makes a huge difference when Grace tells you that altmetrics are things you should look at versus when I, as a sales representative, tell you that. So we have folks who are going around and they're not selling anything. We have a lot of free things people can use. They're explaining how to use it, how to get access to it, what it means, and in a lot of ways lightening the load on our very small commercial team to help educate current users and new users. I'll pause. Any questions so far? Anything? No? All right, cool. Oh, hi. You're smiling at me. Hello. If you build it, they will come. This was actually a lesson that I learned at the American Chemical Society when I worked with ACS Publications. They have a fantastic program called ACS on Campus, which is an outreach program. And this is something that we've definitely done at Altmetric. People want to use this data and understand it, but they often don't know how, and they need a place to crowdsource it. So you need to give people spaces where they can get together and say, you know what, this doesn't make any sense. Like, we don't understand how your algorithm works. We don't understand really how to use this data. What are the use cases? You need to allow people to get together and say, I'm confused, or this is a best practice, or this really worked for me. And you need to be willing to sit down and hear the good and the bad. And I think when customers, potential users can come together and have that conversation with you in the room, that builds trust. And it also gets you feedback that's vital to improving your products and services. So we've done everything from user days, where we've had basically a one-day conference in different parts of the US where customers come together and talk about best practices. We have extensive sort of listserv discussions with different segments of our customer base. We do the Twitter and Reddit kind of online chats pretty frequently. And Altmetricon is something that's actually getting a lot of traction. We haven't done one in the US yet, but we'll be it's not exclusively an altmetric thing. It's a partnership with a lot of different bibliometrics and institutional organizations. And the first one was 1 a.m., one altmetric, I guess. The next one's, so we're on 3 a.m. I don't really know what happens after 12 a.m., but these, we've been doing the event. A lot of people come. The next one's in Budapest. And again, it's a place to come together and figure out how do we use this data, because we all need it, and we're all going to get to a point where we can't really live without it, but we need to understand what it is. And this is our team in London wearing our dedicated donut shirts. What's next? I'm sure most of you have advisory boards. If you don't, I know SSP, one of the services that we try to provide is our librarian focus group as a means of getting you in front of some of your core stakeholders to understand what they expect and what they need from your services. We've been really lucky with our advisory board. It's represented many different sectors that we're working with, and our detractors, folks with this, very candid critiques of our data and what we need to work on and where we need to go. And it's been critical in helping us understand, not what are we doing in 6 months or a year, but what are we doing in 5 years, what are we doing in 10 years. This group meets once yearly, usually in London, and it ranges from faculty to research administrators to librarians to sort of thought leader types. So if you don't have this infrastructure to do something like this, I do recommend partnering with larger organizations that can help you do that. So SSP is a good example. Other publishers or other vendors that you work closely with are an example. But definitely sharing the effort can lighten the load with respect to this kind of a group. And we do a lot of things virtually. So a lot of the meetings are via WebEx, except for that once a year meeting. Oh, wrong direction. Social media presence. This has been really interesting for me. Our chief marketing officer is kind of opened up my eyes to the way to do this. And I think what I've sort of learned is that your social media is compelling when it's not exclusively promotional, right? Everything from sharing, this interesting paper critiquing altmetric scores, to an event that's coming up, to a correction about our data, to clarifications that we've been getting from users, to blog updates. People, we're at well over 10,000 followers in a very short period of time because people know they're not getting spammed by here's one more awesome thing we did that you need to hear about today. Doing that in conjunction with our blog has really been a very useful way of engaging with a big audience and sharing information that we need to get out there, because we're not big on press releases. We don't do those that often. A lot of our big announcements are going to come up on our blog, which is right on our website. A lot of the information that I'll share with prospective customers, with existing customers that have questions, will be to direct them to blog posts. So you end up having a live, dynamic source of information that you can always show customers and hopefully build some sort of a feedback loop where, oh yeah, that blog was helpful to me once. I should go back, I should see what they're doing there, I should follow it. And so really this idea of being compelling and being willing to virtually point out areas to improve, things that you're working on, things that you're having difficulty with, and being willing to do that in person as well through events with actual customers. Again, builds the trust that people feel like we can engage with you as an organization that's thinking broadly about our needs and not just about selling us your particular widget. And free stuff helps, right? I mean, when you have something to play with, it's easier to have a conversation about, how can we really support your needs? So we have, with the new NIH, well, it's not new anymore, but the adjusted NIH BioSketch requirements, the NSF Broader Impacts requirements, a lot of the research fish requirements for grant funding in the UK and Europe. We're trying to provide tools that we work with these organizations to produce that don't yield us anything, but help our users understand, okay, if I want to put altmetric data in a grant application, how do I do that? What are the best practices for that? How do I get more attention to my work? What do I need to do to boost that altmetric score? What does that score mean? All of this stuff we've produced, it's research incentives to create. But we find that tends to, again, generate a lot of trust and interest in learning more about what we do. What else do we have? That's all I've got. Are there any questions I can take right now? Yeah, yes, please.
What's free research or API? How does that work?
Oh, sure. We have two APIs. We have an API that gives researchers, usually in the bibliometric or cyanometric space, access to our data for research purposes, so non-commercial purposes. So we have everything from bibliometrics faculty who are running, they're doing different kind of algorithms on our data to do analysis for publishing. We have for example, an individual researcher may want to put their altmetric donut on their publications site on their website. They can use that. So what it gives them is the counts that we track but not the actual mentions, because that's kind of the counts, whatever, 15 tweets, 20 blog posts. The real kind of bread and butter of what we do is the actual content of the mentions. So that's a commercial tool, and that comes with a subscription. You have to pay for that. But the free thing at least lets researchers play around with the data, data mine, do interesting stuff with the data without necessarily giving it all away, and then hopefully turning it into something that they might pay for later. Yes, please.
How did you go about creating an ambassador program, and how long did it take to establish it?
That's a great question. So the ambassador program didn't take long at all. We brought Stacy. I mean, we knew we needed to have a dedicated person to handle that. I mean, we put out a call for interest, I think, on Twitter, and within 2 days had over 100 people globally saying, I want to be involved in this in some way. Some of them wanted the t-shirt, but most of them really cared and wanted to be involved. So we knew we needed a dedicated person to manage this group, to educate this group, make sure that they're on, that they're saying the right stuff, they're not misrepresenting us. So the amount of time it takes, I'm trying to think how much time Stacy does a lot more than just this. She does a lot of research for us. But it probably takes 10 to 20% of her time, and it's a regular ongoing dialogue through, I believe, a listserv. I think there's a Basecamp group that they use, and they're constantly giving them new content to sort of spread the word on, and new ways of doing it. So providing them with the materials to do it. Yeah. But it's quick to stand up. It's more resource intensive to maintain well, I would say. Anything else? Yes, please.
I'm kind of curious about the user days.
Mm-hmm.
So are those more sort of focus groups, or are they more sort of a mini conference?
The question was about the user days, if they're more like focus groups or if they're more like a mini conference. We have aimed more towards mini conference. So we invite speakers to come and say, here's what I did with this data, here's what worked, here's what's driving us crazy. And then they share. And the one we did in DC was a couple months ago, and even before we started, we had a 9 o'clock start time. At 8 o'clock, everyone in the room was already, sharing and discussing and complaining and praise. All of that stuff was happening really fast, which really suggests people want to have these conversations. But we had to sit there and just say, okay, it's not all going to be how awesome we are. Just be okay with that. And I think people really appreciated it. So we did morning through early afternoon conference type stuff, and then we did do breakout hands-on workshops where people could actually look at our new platform and give us some feedback on things. But people, I don't think, want to do that as much. I think they just want to have a conference, basically. And they don't want to pay for it. So that's something to keep in mind. Although we had people fly from quite a long way to attend it, but there were no costs associated with attending it for us. Anything else? All right, well, let me turn it over to